Hey, welcome! Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on cybersecurity. Now, this is way more than just a tech buzzword, you know? It's the invisible shield that protects our entire digital lives. Everything from your personal photos to the power grid that keeps the lights on. So let's jump right in and figure out what this is all about. To really get why this matters, let's start with a question for you. Just think about it for a second. In a big company with thousands of employees, what's the actual real-world cost when just one person clicks on one bad link? Well, the answer is kind of shocking. In 2024, the average cost of a data breach is nearly $5 million. Yeah, that's the price tag for one little mistake. And right there, that tells you everything you need to know about why cybersecurity isn't just some IT problem. It's a massive business problem. Okay, so before we can even talk about fighting the bad guys, we have to be totally clear on what it is we're trying to protect. So let's kick things off with part 1 and define what we mean by digital security. So at its very core, cybersecurity is all about the practice of defending our digital stuff. We're talking about protecting everything: the networks, your phone, your laptop, and most importantly, the people and the data, from anyone trying to get in and use it for criminal purposes. So how do the pros actually think about this? Well, pretty much all modern security strategy is built on what's called the CIA triad. And no, not that CIA. This is like the foundational blueprint for all security goals. Okay, so this triad has 3 key parts. First up, we have confidentiality. That's all about keeping secrets secret, right? Preventing things like data theft. Next, there's integrity. This means making sure your data is accurate and hasn't been messed with. An attack like ransomware, which locks up your files, is a direct hit on integrity. And finally, there's availability. This is simple: making sure you can get to your systems and your data when you actually need them. A denial of service attack, where a website gets flooded with junk traffic, well, that's a classic attack on availability. And this actually brings up a really interesting shift that's happened. For the longest time, security was almost all about confidentiality, just keeping secrets. But with the crazy rise of things like ransomware, the game has totally changed. Now, making sure your data has integrity and your systems have availability is just as important, sometimes even more important, for just keeping the lights on. All right, so we get what we're trying to protect. Now let's dig into the why. Why are the stakes just so incredibly high? What actually happens when those pillars of security we just talked about start to crumble? Let's circle back to that $5 million number. What's wild is that the biggest chunk of that cost, more than half of it, isn't from the attack itself. Nope, it's from the fallout, the lost customers, the damaged reputation, and the huge expensive effort it takes to clean up the mess. And the damage just keeps spreading, like ripples in a pond. You've got the immediate cash you lose, sure, but then your entire operation might grind to a halt for weeks, even months. For public companies, you'll see the stock price take a nosedive, but maybe the worst part, the loss of trust. That can take years to get back, all while you might be facing millions in government fines. It's a nightmare. Okay, so understanding the consequences is one thing, but how do you actually stop it from happening? Let's get into the strategy. Let's talk about how you actually build a modern digital fortress. The guiding philosophy here is something called defense in depth. And the best way to think about it is like a medieval castle. Seriously, you don't just have one big wall, right? You have a moat, then an outer wall, then an inner wall, and then guards at every single gate. The whole idea is that as an attacker gets past one layer, there are still plenty more to stop them. So what do these modern layers look like? Well, you start at the outside with things like firewalls. That's your perimeter. But let's say an attacker gets through. The next layer is network isolation, which basically traps them in one small part of the network. Then you have another layer, identity controls, like multi-factor authentication, to make it really hard to pretend you're someone you're not. And for the final layer, even if they get all the way to the crown jewels, the data itself is scrambled with encryption, making it totally useless. And this is super important. This is not a one-and-done setup. It's a cycle that never stops. Frameworks like this one from NIST show that it's a constant loop. You have to identify what you're protecting, you protect it, you work on detecting attacks, you respond when they happen, and then you recover. And then you learn from it and you start the whole cycle over again, always getting better. Now, here's a really critical idea that a lot of people miss. Not all security is the same. There is a huge fundamental difference between protecting information technology, your laptops and data servers, and protecting operational technology, the stuff that controls physical things in the real world. Just look at the difference here. In the IT world, the #1 priority is usually the confidentiality of data. But in the OT world, which controls things like a power grid or a water treatment plant, the absolute top priorities are availability and physical safety. An IT failure, you might lose some data. An OT failure, you could have a citywide blackout or people could get hurt. These systems are totally different worlds. Okay, so we've got the concepts, we've got the architecture, but who actually puts all this into practice? This brings us to the final and maybe most important piece of the puzzle, the people. To really be great in this field, to be an effective defender, you need a combination of two different kinds of skills. And the cool thing is, you probably already have one set, and the other set, you can totally learn it. First up are what we call transferable skills. Look, this field isn't just for super geniuses who've been coding since they were 5. It demands incredible problem solving, being able to explain complex stuff simply, and managing your time when everything is on fire. But more than anything, you need a growth mindset. You have to love learning because the bad guys are learning new tricks every single day. And then you combine those skills with a technical toolkit. This is the more specialized stuff. Knowing how to use tools like a SIEM, think of it like a giant security dashboard to find weird activity, or knowing some programming to automate boring tasks. It's about knowing the threat landscape and having a playbook for exactly what to do when an alarm goes off. The two sets of skills together are what make a defender truly effective. Because in the end, it always comes back to people. This quote really says it all. The human element is so often the weakest link, that one mistaken click we talked about. But you know what? It's also our smartest, most adaptable, and most critical line of defense. So if there's one thing to walk away with, it's this. Cybersecurity is not a product you can just buy off a shelf. It's not a project with a start and an end date. It is a continuous, never-ending process of managing risk. It's about building those layers and always being ready, because the threats aren't going anywhere. And that leaves us with one last thing to chew on. We're entering a new era. An arms race where both the attackers and the defenders are using AI. As these attacks get faster and smarter than any person can track, it begs a really big question. Will the next great line of defense be human, or will it be a machine?